Hi, this is Brian Colin, and we are about to get into the recap of Revilo Session 0. I'm going to try and see if I can get uh, Drew to jump in because it was for some. Hey, how's it going,
Hey,
Drew?
Brian. What's going on?
Not too much. Is your evening going well?
Yeah, not too bad.
Awesome. Well, hello, anybody that might be watching this evening. We're going to be recapping Session 0 of our Revilo Fate game. And in that episode, we had character creation, and we'll just talk a little bit about that and be able to answer any questions that people might have. Drew, you want to talk a little bit about things, and I'll send out a little note so people might know that this is happening again.
So what we did was we had 3 of the potentially 5 members, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later tonight, but pretty much put together their characters for Revilo using the Fate core system. Pretty much we had a red, was a Groblin, what were the other ones, Brian?
So you were playing, right?
Yep.
So you were playing the Groblin that was red, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and how that's different from the rest of the Groblin species. We had Heath, who's playing a Grinotar and Grinotars are a species that lives in the floating forest. And maybe what I could do is, while that is happening, while we're talking about each specific species, I could kind of show a quick little insight as to what they are on the screen. Let's see, just a quick illustration, and let me blow this up just a little bit. So the Grinotars generally almost always wear masks because they're used to going through the forest of the dead and trying to avoid the unliving. So they cover their faces. And if I can get my mouse over here, we will be set. Okay. So this is the Grinotar that Heath was playing, something that looks kind of similar to that. And then we had an Outlander, which I just started doing the final illustration on today. That'll be up on the website hopefully soon. And an Outlander is a species that came in from a different land or continent to the current continent on Revilo. And there aren't a whole lot of them in the area, so there hasn't been a lot of information documented about them. Then we have another Grinotar that Alan is playing, which I was kind of helping to create that character because he wasn't able to make it. Even though they're both they'll look very similar. Let's see. I also should go show what your Groblin would look like, although it would be red in the actual once we figure this one out. So, but just in overall, that's kind of what they look like physically.
Right.
So as people tune in, if anybody wants to ask any questions along the way, please feel free. So Drew, had you created characters for Fate before?
Yes, yeah, a few. Okay. Just different settings than a like fantasy-based setting, more of like a like standard world kind of setting. So I mean, Fate has so many different series that you can go with, between Dresden, Atomic Robo, the list goes on, of Bubblegum, Gumshoe. So, I mean, there's a lot of different settings you can go with Fate. This being a fantasy setting was the first time I've done a more fantasy-esque monster-like game. So, yeah.
Okay. One of my favorite parts about the character creation in the Session 0 with Fate that I think has set it apart from other game mechanics, and I think what has kind of bled into some of the other games that are more well known, is that when you're working on the backstories of the characters, and how from there, after you create your first backstory, how it then intertwines and you figure out how your backstory crosses paths with another character. And then you do it again to really try and build that bond. Because I know growing up and playing a lot of D&D, it'd be like, all right, everybody makes their characters, and then you start in a tavern, and then that's just how it comes together. This way, it feels like, as somebody that's going to run the game, it feels like there's a lot more plot hooks that I can try and work in together that will help give more meaning to your characters.
Sure, and I think it nicely ties together the background, especially like you were saying with the other RPGs. You can easily just get thrown into a tavern, or you're looking for work, and then you get thrown in with this hosh-posh group, whereas Fate tends to make more connections at the very beginning of the game. It's somebody that you already know, that you're reliant on, and you've already have a interaction that you can build upon, which is kind of nice for a role-playing aspect.
Absolutely. I feel like because there were almost everybody that was playing or working on characters during that game, we kind of went through it in the session 0 very quickly. So people that might not be really familiar with Fate, we may not have done the best job explaining to them what some of the process was, because we went through it so quickly. So if somebody was watching that and trying to learn Fate, it really went through. That was the first step, was coming up with the backstory, and then crossing the paths, aside from figuring out what your high aspect is. And that's really one sentence or one quick little short saying that really sums up who your character is.
Right. And then just, of course, kind of determining your skills, of what you can't do, or what you're good at doing.
Absolutely. And I love that with stunts, you just completely make those up, and that's what makes your skills so much different than anybody else's, and how even with such a limited range of skills, how you can be so much different than everyone.
Well, and it allows you to give that customization to your character. If you look at some of the other RPGs out there, a lot of the stuff is predetermined. Your skills and spells, or whatever you do, it's very much cookie cutter, the same thing over and over. Whereas with this, it gives you a nice flavor to be able to build upon a really cool stunt or skill that you want to be able to perform, but really be able to also perform those things that when you say in a D&D game or another RPG game that you're trying to do this miraculous thing, it's a little bit more far-fetched because all the other characters are very cookie-cuttered. Whereas in Fate, you're saying, hey, I can do this. And then when you get to that point where you can do that, it's like a big moment. Absolutely.
I'm so excited about everybody getting into the game and playing next Thursday. So one of the things with this that as we develop this, there's certain skills that are new based on the Revilo campaign setting that are still being developed, as well as like every character that the players are playing are new species that haven't been introduced in any other Fate campaign setting, since they're all from my own world. So some of the rules with that are going to be changing and twisting as we go, and as the players kind of help evolve those species and playable characters within the setting. So that's some of the fun for viewers that are going to be watching along as the season progresses, and seeing how that might affect the actual game mechanics as the rules become a little more formalized.
Yep, for sure. And I think like one of the talking about like some of the things that are different, like for example, in Fate, you normally don't have healing. It's normally, something you take your damage, whether it be mental or physical, and at the end of that round, you're pretty much, it wipes out. Whereas with what we were talking about with my character is we're developing a healing aspect where the character can actually heal a point of that mental or physical based off of how well the dice rolls go, which kind of adds a new aspect to it, which I don't know of any other Fate game that actually puts in that kind of healing. So kind of cool things that we're kind of growing and developing this whole system as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's very exciting, because that wasn't anything that I had thought of. And I'm currently running another Fate game in this same setting that's not behind a camera, that's in person, close to my home with a bunch of friends. And some of the things that they've added to it are like, before you guys, like, they added the whole alchemy aspect, which I hadn't even worked into the storyline, which is now part of the overall themes of the entire world, which that's greatly affected everything. So it's fun to see how things like that'll change. Like when you were talking about that, reducing a mental or physical stress box, that's also all going to affect larger consequences that take longer to heal, like broken limbs or, severed limbs, things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's kind of cool about the setting is that it's kind of growing and developing its own unique personality.
Yes.
And we'll see where everything gets taken. Right?
Yeah, so, absolutely. Yeah. All going to go and grow in lots of fun directions.
So a few questions for you is what do the viewers and players like myself have in store for them in this season?
Well, so
any hints, any kind of divulging of plans, or?
So I don't want to give too much away, mainly because I don't want I like surprising players more than anything.
I'll keep a secret, I promise.
Well, speaking of keeping secrets, one major thing that I can talk about is in the world there's a group of characters called the Keepers of Secrets, and they have little fragments of an old god that kind of is magically fused into their chest. And at one point there were 18 of them, but there's a separate faction that is starting to hunt them down. And when we start this campaign, the 18 will now be down to 16. So that's going to be one of the large underlying stories that's going to kind of intertwine into the other major plot lines that we talked about in Session 0 that everybody was interested in. It seemed like there was a big interest in the Great Conclave that's going to be happening in the Icy Divide, which is a giant culmination of representatives from all of the Reaper clans, as well as like a huge almost congregation or convention of merchants outside of the Conclave. So I think there will be a lot of conflict and intrigue and mystery with those that are hunting the Keepers of Secrets. A lot of the things that I like to work into storylines with games is not just the fighting aspect, but the idea of the problem solving, the mystery. I like there to be interesting twists and turns that people won't necessarily see coming, and seeing how that affects the characters and how that changes. Like when I see players playing characters, I like to see those characters develop and grow as they experience things in the game. Like even though your character might be this now, all the events that they go through could fundamentally change their who they are as they progress over the course of a campaign.
Sure.
And how they see the world.
What do you think will be the main story? Or do you think the main story will be the Conclave, or do you think the main story will be more of the Keeper of Secrets?
I'm not sure exactly. So
something completely different.
Well, another thing that I love about Fate, which seems to be different than most other games, is players' ability to affect the story. And the idea that, okay, you know what? I'm going to spend a fate point to change something something fundamentally in the situation that I'm in, or the setting, or the scenario. So I think a lot of that is going to come out after we get a couple of sessions in and seeing what direction you guys actually take it. Because as a game master, I don't want to be so controlling. I want to leave it very open-ended. Like if I know there's all these things going on, if I have all these different characters that could come into play, I like to see where you guys kind of navigate on your own, and then just kind of and it will go in wherever it goes. It's going to be fun because you guys will help guide it there.
And for everybody that was watching, we have four characters, but we are currently working on throwing a curveball at Brian a little bit, adding the fabulous Lisa to our group. So I believe Lisa will be making a character sometime shortly, because we have till week from Thursday. And we'll see where she goes with that, because that will be interesting dynamic to not only see where she goes with that, but also just to add a female to the group of which was all guys to start with. So
Right.
that always makes a nice companion and always makes a nice addition to the team. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you think? Do you have any idea? Does she talk to you about where she wants to go with that, or?
I have not, but only because I think she was just coming back from WonderCon.
Yep.
And so I didn't want to like bombard her with emails on the day after coming back from a con. So because we were just communicating over the weekend, I sent her the materials. It's kind of a lot. Like I've been living Revilo for so many years. It's like, oh, here's a giant book that's a PDF that's 140 pages. It's a lot to kind of look through, and then I sent her the link to the website with the different species she could play. So I was going to try and follow up tomorrow or Wednesday, try and get an idea and set up a time to have a video call to kind of go through the character generation, and then see if any of the folks that were in the game would be interested in being on that as well, to help see if there's any stories where paths could cross with her character. I'm hoping that she'll play a species that hasn't been played by anybody else in the group so far. Because I think that would be a lot of fun. And I don't know her except for your introduction, so I've got an idea if she's interested, but I want to, before I divulge that to anybody else, I want to run it by her and see if she'd have any interest, because I think it could add a lot to an existing storyline that's happening that nobody else knows about, that's not written in the text of the book that's coming out. It's not in the core game mechanics or the game setting yet, but it's one of the bigger storylines that's a part of the world setting that's hopefully going to be revealed to everyone else as time goes on. So I think that could be a lot of fun, even though it's extremely vague.
Okay. All right. Well, something to look forward to Thursday, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So why don't we, since we talked about the races that are being played right now, why don't we go through the races that haven't been chosen yet to kind of see what else there's available.
And hang on, let's see. And so all of I'm planning on having everybody's character up on a website prior to or during the next show, and I'll give out the link then once I figure out exactly where I'm going to put it. Let's see, screen share. Here we go.
So you're trying to keep everybody honest.
Not so much that, but I want, when you're coming up with new species that nobody really knows, I want people that are viewing to be able to connect with them.
Sure.
And I think so if they can see at least an image of what their characters is and the information about them, it'll make it a little bit easier. Also, we'll hopefully get people excited about the Fate campaign setting that will be coming out, and that'll help just reinforce everything. So one of the species that nobody is playing is the Dryadamus, and they are a very agile, smart species that lives in the shanty towns, primarily dangling in the roots below the floating forest. A huge population of Dryadamus basically mine crystals that grow on these roots that dangle down in the floating forest, and that's where a huge chunk of them get their income and support their families. But then there's a lot of them that have traveled out to some of the other cities and made homes outside of that. We spoke about the Grenatars because we have two different, we have both Heath and Alan playing Grenatars, and they also have their own sign language because of having to keep silent within the floating forest. We have you as the Groblin.
But red.
But red, yes, but red. I'll have to do some photo manipulation on that one, putting that into your imagery.
Simple Photoshop.
Yep. We have Carcathians, which live below the perilous peaks in the caverns there, and they're a very interesting species because they've been hunted by gray skulls for quite some time. We have the Outlanders, which maybe in a few minutes I'll slap up my iPad so you can see the color version of what I'm working on for that. But I started going into more detail on that last night and this morning. We have Priscinolites, which live primarily in the trees of the floating forest, and they're very, very intelligent, very dry personalities, very straight to the point. but they definitely move with ease within the trees. So far, we only have one of the Reaper species available for play, and that's the Lacanap Reaper. There are a bunch of different Reapers that have evolved over time, and those will eventually become playable, but this is the only one that I've written so far. And with this specific one, the mushrooms that grow on their back have medicinal properties. So oftentimes you'll see different Lacanap Reapers eating on each other's back, which is a little bit odd.
And that's one of the ones that that was the one I was going to go with, but didn't do the Groblin. Nice. Actually, yeah.
And then we have the Sorcias, and Sorcias are a very intelligent mole-like people that live in the tunnels under the Waiju Desert. They have the largest cities within Revilo, the most advanced society. Everything runs on methane, and throughout these tunnels, there's so many different moving parts in all of their cities. It's very steampunky in their giant cities, and they're definitely interesting characters as well. Do you have any questions about any of the species, or any thoughts you want to talk about with those?
Not really, but I would like to know, like, what is the next species? Is there going to be another species or species in the book that you're going to add as playable races other than these? Maybe any hints on that?
Well, so one could possibly be the Hassanaval, which is so the Hassanaval is a creature that isn't originally from the mainland on Revilo, and there's not a lot of them. Mm-hmm. There's very two small families of them within this continent, and I thought about making those a playable species. I will pop that one up real quick because I have a feeling that they are going to be very well liked by folks. Let's see. Here we go. So some of the interesting parts on this.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And so they have this magical like orb in the center of their forehead, which when they're young, instinctually makes them invisible when they're in danger. And as they age, they learn how to control it. So I think that is going to be one that will probably quickly be added to the book.
Now, talk about that keyhole.
Okay, so actually, I just clicked off of it. So let me.
There you go.
Oh,
right there.
Yeah, but then it's hang on. Let's pop that back. There we go. Oh yeah. So the keyhole is almost hitting share. There we go. So the keyhole on the chest. This particular one in the original sculpture, which doesn't quite fit in with the storyline of the book, because as the story has evolved, things have changed a little bit from pieces that I've sculpted to what's currently going on. And keyholes in someone's chest would represent the Keepers of Secrets. The faction I talked about earlier being only 18 of them, now being dwindled down to 16. So this character, specifically when sculpting it, was thought that it was going to be a Keeper of Secrets. And that can be when someone has this. So basically, there's this fragment that goes inside of them. And once they absorb it, they gain all of the memories and the secrets that this fragment has absorbed over centuries. It's almost like a blinding, crazy, flashing, almost like a data dump into their brain. Mm-hmm. And then one Keeper of Secrets dies, they generally have already picked who the next one is going to be. It doesn't have to be the same species. It's generally, they usually choose who it's going to go to next. So then when they're getting ready to die, it kind of comes out of their body and then moves into the next person's, and then a magical lock just fuses into their chest.
So similar to like a Green Lantern kind of thing, where it picks the host.
Yes.
Of the next one.
Mm-hmm. And so, and then when that happens, that person then gets all the memories. And Keepers of Secrets are really revered throughout the continent as they will come around and travel. And if they come to your city or your town or your village, chances are you're going to want to go and talk to them. And because it's so rare that you get to see one, and a lot of times that then allows you to just kind of absolve yourself of anything that you would want to get off your chest, and then that just absorbs into them.
So not to dive too much into the first session, but can you talk a little bit maybe about how, if this magic moves from one species to another, one host to another, how there were 18 and now there's only 16? Why? Okay. What stopped?
What's happening? Sure.
What's stopping?
So there's become a new faction called the Truth Seekers that are trying to collect those fragments. So all 18 of these fragments were originally part of the arm of one of the two original gods. So the first god was Creedona, and her sister Girma had followed her. And when Creedona decided to rest and form a ball and create this planet, Girma came and landed down and started walking on the planet. Creedona ended up spawning children, which are the rest of the gods, and Girma created one of her own because at that point she couldn't shadow all of Creedona's children. So it was Girma and the Veil. And as animals started to come into play, Girma created the first species that were sentient on the planet that weren't the gods, and those were the Reapers. And as more and more species started populating, there started to become fighting and war. And as more and more of that happened, Creedona was so distraught over what had come of this world that she had built that there was the Earth Shatter, which was a giant battle between all the gods and Creedona and Girma. And when Creedona and Girma were fighting, Creedona tore off her sister's arm. And when that happened, the continent shattered, the giant landmass, and then continents started moving off. Girma floated off in a different direction, and Creedona had this arm that then broke into the 18 pieces. And it was then that Creedona decided that these 18 pieces needed to go into different species and travel and collect things, trying to absorb all of the good things that were happening in the world, because she believes that her sister is evil, and that if there was enough light inside of her, that when these pieces came back together and fused to her, the fighting would stop. They wouldn't bicker anymore, and everything would it would be a much happier. Her sister would be a much happier person. So her original idea is to put these out, and then eventually one day collect them back and give them back to Girma. So these Truth Seekers believe that if they collect all of these, they will be able to get their god that they worship, Girma, back to walk the earth and restore her to her full capacity and full greatness.
Cool.
So whether or not they've just killed those two keepers of secrets and taken the fragments, whether those two are imprisoned, whether two people have killed them and then absorbed them, that's all stuff that'll kind of come out in game.
Very cool. What now there were a few other things that we talked about, like I believe one of them was the giant worm. That was something that we kind of talked about as being something we're interested in, but maybe not the main quest.
Sure. So the Livnas are the giant sandworms in the Waiju Desert that have been that the Sorcias have been collecting their excrement for years and farming the methane off of it. Ever since the Outlanders have arrived, at least that's how they're kind of placing it in the historical timeline. The Livna have stopped laying eggs. And once all the eggs are hatched and once the Livnas die off, they fear that they will not have any methane to power their giant cities. So they're worried about that, worried if it's the Outlanders coming in, if it's something else that's happening within the land. And a lot of that is part of the main discussion that's supposed to be happening at the Great Conclave coming up in the Icy Divide.
Very cool.
And I know we had slotted this for a 30-minute recap. Did you have more things that you wanted to chat about tonight?
I mean, we could probably go on and on, but I know that you and I will both be at MegaCon, so we'll
Yes.
probably do some kind of stream after the con, as long as we're not dead, or from the con. I don't know, but
Yep.
come check us out at the Norse Foundry booth if you're going to be at MegaCon. I know Brian's bringing a bunch of Revilo creatures with him, so that will be a lot of fun. And then, why don't we just quickly go through the players and a little history behind them? And I think that's good for tonight.
Cool. That sounds good.
We pretty much wrapped what we were trying to accomplish up.
Yeah, and if anybody watches this after the fact, every Monday following the game night, we're gonna have the Revilo recap as a way to answer questions, talk about not only the episode but also some of the game mechanics, and try and help introduce Fate to more folks. Because by the time the Revilo Age of Discovery Fate campaign book comes out, I want you to know how to play and be ready to just jump in to running your own game in the set. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to talk about the players? Do you want me to?
Well, I can at least talk about myself.
Excellent.
I'm Drew, one of the founders of Norse Foundry, and I'm also part of Norse Publishing, which is the publisher that is putting out the art book for Revilo, and we will also be launching the Fate book of Revilo, hopefully later on this year. More up to this guy here than up to me, but he's making great progress on both that book, and the art book is pretty much done. Just has to be hit print and go.
Yep.
We pretty much make a lot of metal dice, metal coins. We're doing the metal coins for Revilo as well. And that's what we do. I have my buddy Eric Daniels, who is a school teacher. He's not really heavily involved in the gaming industry whatsoever, but he's a great guy and a great help for us, because I could bounce a lot of ideas off him. So very creative guy. He's in my Sunday gaming group. So I'm really excited to have him along, because Brian doesn't know this a lot, but we were very well known for getting into a lot of shenanigans that likes to throw a lot of parties off. And we tend to split the party because we are the party.
Awesome.
But, so that is something for Alan and Heath and potentially Lisa to be looking forward to, is the shenanigans of us two. But those are the two that I know. And then Lisa is a part of, oh man, what is the name of the podcast?
How We Roll.
How We Roll. I was going to say that, but I knew that it would have screwed that up. How We Roll, I believe she also does a Call of Cthulhu podcast. She's also done some things for charity. That it was how I got introduced to her. For the Critical Role, they did a musical rendition CD release party that had a lot of money going to charity, so we donated some dice to it, which is how I got introduced to Lisa. And Lisa's also been a fan of our dice, so our paths crossed, and I asked her if she was interested in this game, and she's happily said yes. So I'm happy to have her on board. And then we have Heath, who you know better, Brian.
So Heath Robinson is one of the two founders of Infinite Black. They're the folks behind the Elder Dice, very, very Lovecraftian themed dice, and they're working on an RPG as well. And Heath is quite a phenomenal writer and a really great guy. Then we also have Alan Panicle, who has his own series, Ancient Ones. He does this fractured impressionism. It's all very sci-fi and space themed, very, very cool style. And we have been convention buddies since last year and gone to a lot of shows together, and are roommates at a lot of shows and end up being neighbors as artists at those as well. And then there's me. I'm Brian Colin. I am the creator of Revilo. I have my company Creature Curation, where I do all of my weird fantasy taxidermy creatures. My book, Creature Collection Volume 1, for Revilo is still available for pre-order, as it is just waiting on a final digital PDF proof before I then get printer proofs back, and then it all goes to press. That can be found at worldofrevilo.com. And you can also pick up some of Norse Foundry's dice in the process, as well as the coins that Norse Foundry is doing as well.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that wraps up that part of the segment.
Otherwise, I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure you're looking forward to it.
Yes.
I would tell you not to plan too far ahead, because
I never do.
Eric and I like to screw plans up. We're very good at that.
Awesome.
So, other than that, I think we're good.
Very cool. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in or watching this after the fact. We look forward to posting episodes every other Friday on Norse Foundry's YouTube channel, and then the recap the following Monday. So please tune in and feel free to reach out with any questions or thoughts you have on the show.
And subscribe.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.